Welcome to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast, where each week we speak with brands, icons, innovators, and trailblazers within the fly fishing industry, exploring both the successes and failures they've encountered along the way to become who they are today. But first, if you have not yet subscribed to the podcast or joined our email list, please do so by going to the flyfishinginsiderpodcast.com, or you can also find us on Instagram at Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. Now let's begin. Today our guest is Steve. He's the brand manager of Islander Reels. Islander Reels are considered to be the world's most best and sought after reels by many fly fishers globally. Islander Reels is a long-standing brand within the industry and is also an industry icon. With the manufacturing made right here in British Columbia, Canada on the West Coast, Islander Reels continues to be a leader in forefront and innovation. Here today to tell us more about this is Steve. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, no worries. Super excited that you're here. You know, Islander Reels is close to my heart. Proud owner of a few of them. And yeah, I'm excited. So let's jump into it. But before we talk about the brand, I want to know about you and how you got started with fly fishing and fishing itself on the West Coast. And more importantly, how you got involved with Islander Reels.
Yeah, so that's kind of a long story.
That's why we're here.
I'll try and give you the medium length version. I grew up in Ontario. I spent a lot of time outdoors then, loved it. Big time fishing, but back there it's kind of like visiting my friends' cottages and casting spinning gear and bait casting gear for bass and if I was lucky, maybe a walleye or pike. But come sort of teenage years, I got pretty heavily involved in the sport of wrestling, Olympic wrestling, and I took that pretty far. I wrestled through college and then beyond. Represented Canada internationally at several competitions and stuff. Lived in Montreal during that period. And I don't know if you're familiar with Montreal, but if you don't have a car, it's kind of like Canada's sort of most urban culture. People in Montreal like the city. If you don't have a car, you don't have many peers that are into the outdoors world. So at that time, the fishing passion sort of was on hold. I picked up hunting in that time as well, though. But eventually the wrestling career ended when I was 27. And at that point, it was like I had been starving myself for the outdoors fix that I needed to swing the other way. So when I was young, my dad had gone up and visited a friend in the Yukon and brought back pictures of all these huge fish. And I really wanted to check that out. So I did. I found a job in gold exploration up in the Yukon. Basically was a professional hiker for a couple summers, and on days off, I was doing as much fishing as possible. Really got into fly fishing at that time, as well as a lot of hunting, and lived up there for 4.5 years and loved it. I mean, if you like the outdoors, it's a spectacular place. I mean, I'm in BC now, and people talk a lot about BC being a beautiful place, and it is, but you share it with a lot of people. And up north, it's your own. But I started actually dating a girl. We met online. She lived in California. I was living in the Yukon, so a little bit long distance. That needed to come to an end somehow. And so she got into grad school in Victoria, and we basically met in the middle through a series of fortunate events. Islander Reels was looking for someone with marketing experience, and that's what 2 degrees in that space. And so it was a perfect fit. I had an interview with the owner and a couple of the manager, and basically by the end of the phone interview, they hired me on the spot. It was clearly a good fit. And so I've been here now for a little over 2 years.
You said you had a love affair with fly fishing. Walk me through that. Like, how'd you get started in fly fishing? Your story sounds like much like mine. Like, from being back east, transitioning from the spin cast into the fly fishing, you got started and fell in love with that. So how did you get started and fall in love with that?
I did an undergrad at McMaster and wrestled through there. And then there was kind of a summer where I was trying to decide what I was going to do. And I tree planted for that summer. Fly fishing was sort of always on the radar. I had tried it once up at my buddy's cottage and I said, I want to give this a go. And at that time, I bought a 6-weight outfit. Edmonton did like a little bit of a hitchhiking road trip through BC and Alberta, and it fished a little bit, but didn't really that was basically the only time that 6-weight got used. So after that, it was immediately after that summer that I moved to Montreal and lived there for 4.5 years. And that rod just collected dust until I moved up to the Yukon. And at that point, I knew I was in a place where, catching grayling it's easy and it's fun and there's lots of them. And at that point, the fly fishing sort of just took off. It grew from there. I'm definitely not an expert at fly fishing. I'm not, we have our field team of some pretty exceptional anglers with Islander, and I'm not on their level, but I do love to be out there on the water and figuring out rivers. And my parting gift from the ad agency I worked at in Whitehorse was a fly tying set. all my bosses were fly fishermen. So since I've moved south, I started tying my own flies and everything else too. And that's part of the fun with fly fishing, is that it's just, there's a lot of levels to it, and it goes deep. It's a deep rabbit hole, and I like that. It's fun.
You say there's a lot of levels to it. I think a lot of us could agree to that for sure. So here you are. So you get hired by Islander on the spot. You're ready to go. What's your role there?
It's a lot of different things. I call myself a brand manager, and that is sort of where my particular niche and expertise is. But at the company like ours, you've got to be a bit of a jack of all trades. So whether it's having new clothes designed, managing the website, or overseeing the development of a new website, building relationships with the field team, making that effective, activating that, sponsorship stuff, looking at new markets, new product development, you sort of have a hand in everything. And so it's pretty broad. I manage all of our social media as well. So it's broad, kind of one of the things that keeps it fun. There's no 2 days that are the same, and there's always sort of something new to work on. And, you know, before I started here, I knew nothing about getting clothes made. And our clothes are all made in Canada. And unfortunately, there isn't a big clothing manufacturing business in Canada anymore. A lot of people are shipping offshore, just like they do with their reels. And we wanted to represent and be made in Canada, show people that in the same way that our reels are made here and we care about our jobs here, we care that way about our clothes too. So I sourced that and dug into that and found some great suppliers that have been able to help us. So, you know, it's expanding my skills.
Definitely a jack of all trades. I do want to ask you, you said you've been with Islander for 2 years. The history of Islander is a lot longer than that. Can you tell us about the history?
Yeah, it is. It's actually pretty remarkable. Our company started manufacturing fishing reels in 1990. We were a machine shop before that and continue to be a machine shop. So the machine shop, our parent company, J.S. Foster Corporation, makes parts for all sorts of things, from ocean sensors to inserts to some boat manufacturers, all kinds of things. But, you know, back in the day, there was a machinist who wanted to manufacture a center pin reel. And so he talked with the boss and they made that happen. And our first reel was called the Pacific Steelheader. It proved to be pretty popular. There was also a demand for, at the time, there weren't really any machined aluminum mooching reels on the market, which is sort of a single action type of trolling reel that people use for salmon fishing out here on the West Coast. And the boss said, hey, we could make one of those, which we did. And then there was a third person who said, hey, we should be making fly reels too, because they're pretty similar in function, all three types. So back in the 90s, that's sort of what happened. There was a lot of innovation. There was anti-reverse fly reels. There was all kinds of experimentation. But at the end, we are a machine shop and we're pretty proud of the machining that goes into all of our reels. You know, a lot of people who have looked at our reels and you pick one up and you look at the fine details and you can really see that these are top quality machining. And part of that is the fact that it's made in Canada. We have very high quality control standards. And we like to say our reels are built to last a lifetime or two. I mean, people are handing our reels down in their wills kind of thing. That says a lot about the quality and the machining that goes into this and what we're pretty proud of here.
I agree with you. The reels are top quality. As an owner, a proud owner of a few of them as well. So the history of the company, like, what do you think the early day focuses were of the brand? Was it more of the center pinning? Was it just more diverse? Like, hey, we got to do a center pin, we got to do a mooching, we got to do a fly reel. Like, walk me through what the focus was back in the early days.
It's hard to say that there was a focus. It was kind of like there was a niche that just needed to be filled. Sure. It was kind of like that was what happened, particularly with the mooching segment. That was what really sort of set us off. Nobody had done what we started at that time. And a few of the dealers here on Vancouver Island really got behind our product and they got into the hands of guides and it really took off. So that still is a big part of our business. But we also had a rep at the time who was a big fly fisherman. He said, hey, we got to get in this game. And so he did a lot of work building up that brand, building a dealer network for the fly side of the business. And that really, there was a time in particular where, you know, the Islander reels were pretty well known across North America. And I think that still is true to a degree. But at the time, late 90s, early 2000s, I mean, there were a lot of reels spread out across the continent. The financial crisis hit, though, the 9/11 hit and there were some issues at the border and that kind of hurt us. And then the financial crisis hit and that hurt us again in the States. And so while we have been a little bit quieter in the American market in the last decade, in Canada, we're still regarded as one of the premier fly reels reels, and we're looking at the States again and saying, hey, we're still here, we're still going strong, and we want to be back in your hands. And so we've got a couple things in the works that are helping us recognize that we're going to be back.
You know what, Steve, you mentioned some challenges there. Is there any other challenges or roadblocks that Islander has faced or is currently facing?
There's always challenges and roadblocks. I mean, that's part of running a business, isn't it? You can't stop it, but you just have to adapt and overcome. And so there's new product development, which is always in the pipeline, always stuff that we're working on, and that continues to be the case. Even just little things like, it's a machine shop, and sometimes machines break, and so you've got to fix your machines and keep them going, and we do. The market is always shifting. Before, the reason I was brought on was there was a recognition that maybe the stuff that we had been doing in the past for marketing wasn't relevant the same way it is, or the same way it was, and so I've been brought on to sort of reinvigorate that, and I think we have improved dramatically in terms of our social media presence, our contact with our followers, and just being present as a company. So the landscape is always shifting, and we just try and stay on top of it. And part of running any business is the challenges.
I am going to touch on social media in a second here, but before I do that, I want to ask you, is there something that the brand has always maintained or kept true to with their customers? Like they've always maintained a focus of great quality, or it's got to be the gold or a certain metal? Like walk us through, let us know.
There's not a company out there manufacturing reels that isn't going to say, oh, we make the best reels out there. I mean, that's part of your job as a company to say that. But we really do take a lot of pride in the machining that goes into our work, our reels. I mean, the quality control and the standards that we have are exceptional. And, we call them blems. So there may be a little blemish on the reel, and it really is like a blemish. And we send them to our dealers, and dealers look at them and they're like, I don't know what you're calling a blemish, but if this is a blemish, then, that makes me feel pretty good about what, if you're willing to send this one out and call it a blemished reel, then I don't know what's going on into the good ones. So, we really do take pride in the quality of our products, the quality of our machining, the finishing. All of our reels are hand polished to a mirror finished rather than just tumbled or sandblasted. There's a lot of attention to detail, and that's what makes our reels, that's what makes us be able to say, yeah, we're going to last a lifetime or two. That's why people are handing them down in their wills, because they know after 20 years of use in salt water, they can hand them down to their child or their grandchild and know that that's still got another 30 years of life in it. So we take pride in that for sure. And I think that is what has allowed us to stay relevant over the decades.
I would agree with that, definitely. Why do you think you guys are so successful in this niche where others have failed? And you guys are successful, and you did mention the word niche earlier. I agree that you filled this void.
I think part of it is that we are somewhat unique in that we are the only, as far as I know, we're the only North American manufacturer of those three lines of reels that I mentioned earlier. So we have our mooching reels, which they're predominantly used for trolling for salmon, but they're actually effective in for warm water species and light tackle as well. We have that market. It's pretty important to us. But we also are big players in the center pin world. Again, it's particularly effective technique for targeting anadromous species in the Great Lakes, Pacific Northwest. So we got a lot of center pin reels, a lot of big followers in that market. But then we also have the fly, and the fly is obviously a global phenomenon. And so by sort of distributing our focus across three niches, we can absorb hits like whether it's regulation changes or a downturn in the economy or whatever. We've got revenue streams from different businesses or different niches that allow us to be successful. On top of that, we are also the only large-scale Canadian manufacturer of fly fishing reels. And so that does give us a little bit of a unique niche in terms of our core following in Canada, and we like to support them and take care of our Canadian base.
I just want to step off track here and ask you, you mentioned about the steelheading and center pin reels and whatnot. Like, do you see like a ramp up in sales come fall throughout the year? Like, is there ramps in your sales for these, for your reels in certain particular times and markets?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the reel sales follow the fishing seasons,
right? That's what I was thinking,
right?
Yeah.
We're just we come into salmon fishing season now, and obviously the guys getting their boats ready to get out onto the ocean or the Great Lakes are gearing up. Fall, winter, steelheading is a big thing for those anyways who are fine with braving cold fingers and sub-zero days on the rivers in Ontario and New York and Michigan and Ohio and all those other states around the Great Lakes. And then of course fly fishing, there's kind of it follows sort of the summer season, starts in spring and lasts throughout to the fall typically. But then over the winter, there's guys doing their big trips, right? You know, a lot of people, they like to gear up when they're going to places like the Golden Dorado River Cruiser or Jurassic Lake with Estancia Laguna Verde, a couple of the Islander destinations that we've had the pleasure of visiting. This sort of year round, it definitely comes in waves, but and those waves follow the fishing seasons. So most definitely the business operates that way.
I like how the business is structured in that way, in a sense, after the fish. So, you talked about the Great Lakes and Michigan and upstate New York and all that sort of stuff. Like, is there a focus to try and expand the brand into that area?
Well, as I said, the centerpin world, they know us and they love our reels. We make good centerpin reels and they're big followers of us there. But I don't think, even when I look on social media and I see what other fly fishing companies are posting or what other businesses are posting, the Great Lakes do not get enough credit for the fishery that's going on there. I mean, the salmon fishing, the steelheading, the brown trout, it is unbelievable. And even for the big water, for our mooching segment, I don't think people give it enough credit for how good that fishery is. I mean, we're talking 20 plus pound migratory brown trout. And you think like, oh, you got to go to Norway or you got to go to Iceland to find these big bruiser browns. It's like, no, this is, within reach of 25 million people when you factor in cities like Chicago and Toronto. Even in Toronto, when I grew up, and I'm ashamed to say I grew up a 10-minute bike ride from the Great Lakes, from Lake Ontario, and I really did not appreciate just how good the salmon fishing was there. As a matter of fact, it's better than what it is on the West Coast right now, at least in southern BC. And so to be able to have a fishery like that, like why are we driving 3 hours north to go fish for bass on the Kawarthas or Muskoka or something when we've got 30-pound salmon swimming around in our backyards, or 20-pound browns, or resident brookies in the upper forks of the Credit that you can target on the fly? And that, obviously, Ontario is what I'm most familiar with, but it's the same story in Michigan. It's the same story in Wisconsin. It's the same story upstate New York. I mean, the fishery really is exceptional. And even Atlantic salmon, there's concerted efforts to restore Atlantic salmon in Lake Ontario. And that's somewhat controversial, but in Lake Huron, they've been introduced and they're having success. St. Mary's River is a phenomenal Atlantic salmon fishery now. So you can go up to Sault Ste. Marie and target them at the right time of the year. I mean, there's a really diverse and pretty exciting fly fishing opportunities there. And there's hardly anybody that is really involved. And that's got to change. So we're looking at that as an area where we want to become involved. And because we're already in the centerpin game, we kind of feel like we can help cross people over into the fly world, and we want to do what we can for those fly fishermen who are out there and who are interested in seeing their sport grow in their local waters and supporting them. And that's definitely an area we want to see.
So what are some of the ways that you guys are looking to expand that to on a company or a brand's behalf? Like, walk me through that.
You know, that's an interesting question. And growing a brand is a puzzle. There's a lot of different ways, but one of the things that I find is most important is that it's really about building relationships. It starts that way. That's how our brand grew in the first place. It's about getting to know the dealers who are there. It's about getting to know the local fishermen, the guys who are running the beats, the guys who are doing a lot of fishing, and getting to know them and letting them know, hey, man, not only do we care about selling you reels, we care about the fishery. We care about seeing you guys thrive, and we need to know how we can help facilitate that. Obviously, the reels are the most obvious way of doing that, but there's a lot more that we can do in terms of getting exposure to the fishery, chatting with, there's some podcasts out there and get to know those guys, supporting Learn to Cast events. We're trying to look for as many opportunities like that as possible, and getting to know people who have the same vision in the area and getting behind them and supporting them. And that goes the same for our big water stuff. We're really looking at the Great Lakes salmon fishing scene and saying, you know, you guys are drag level wind reels. It's kind of like, as far as I'm concerned, it's the big water equivalent of casting gear. You know, you can just winch the fish in, whereas you put a reel on or fish on one of our mooching reels, and it takes the game to a whole other level. It's like driving a manual instead of an automatic transmission. You just feel everything, and it's just a more fun way of fishing.
Especially for a guy that has that client that might be a repeat client, and it's like, yeah, you know, we do this every year. But by switching it up, like, you know, with a different reel, it just changes the whole game. It does. And
it really
does. And it keeps it fresh. So it's a great opportunity for any guys that are looking, hey, add a couple to the arsenal. You're not going to go wrong. So definitely.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing like hearing your fly reel spinning backwards and the line peeling off and screaming off. That's part of the reason why fly fishing is fun, right? You feel everything. When that fish goes for a run, it goes directly through the line, into the spool, and into your handle and into your hand. And you realize, hey, I got to let go of this or my knuckle's going to get a smack. That's fun, right? Like, that's what we like to fish for. That's why we get that thrill. You can feel every head shake. That's what fishing's all. At the end of the day, that's
Definitely. Some of the aspects that Islander is fantastic is not just the looks, but the quality and the function of the reel. Walk me through how like you guys designed the function, the testing that goes into it. I know you talked earlier a bit about blemishes and whatnot, but there's got to be like the vigorous testing, I'm sure, no doubt. Walk me through that.
Yeah, we've got some longtime builders, Mike Chan. You can see him, find him on social, Real Ninja. He's exceptional, and the things that he pulls out of those reels or is able to feel, like he just knows when something is not right. And so obviously when we're developing new reels, there's a lot of testing that goes into that, and it's about time on the water. It's about building jigs to spin your reels for 4 or 5 days straight and see, what's the breaking point of this thing? How fast can we get it up to? What are the RPMs like? What does the wear look like after being spun on a jig with drag on for 5 days in a row or longer? So there's a lot of that. But then when it comes to actual building, every reel goes through Mike's hands. He tests it in and out, and he just knows. He's handled literally thousands upon thousands of reels, and if there's anything that is not working exactly perfect, we're going to figure it out, and that reel is either going to be fixed or scrapped. It doesn't go to market unless it's just right. So whether it's a new reel in terms of product testing and getting it to the hands of our field team and making sure it's working right, or our existing reels that are being built for the market, nothing slips through the cracks, and we make sure that everything is running perfect before we send it to market. And the best part is that's all in-house. That's why we kind of keep our field team small. We've got some trusted anglers that have been doing this for a long, long time, and they know the products. They know what they need out of a fishing reel, and we want to get that field feedback from them to know whether we've got it dialed in or not, and they can tell us. So rather than having someone contract out the work or sending it overseas, it's all done in-house. And if something is found to be wrong, we go and talk to the machinist and say, hey, we need to adjust the tolerance here by a couple thou, or we need to adjust some other part of the design to make sure this functions properly. That's one of the cool things about being a machine shop with machinists who have been here for 30 years and seen every line of reel come through. These guys, we know what we're doing, and it results in the quality that you see.
You mentioned, Steve, about the field team and the field testers. Walk me through who they are, like what their job is, what their role is. And you mentioned that is very small. And why is it so small? Specific.
Well, the field team, we generally work with guys who are credible within the industry, who have been around for a long time. We also look for guys that have fished multiple styles of our reels, so whether that's center pin and fly, or mooching and center pin, or mooching or all three. So these guys are exceptional. Folks like Brian Chan. I mean, Brian Chan and Phil Rowley have both literally written the book on stillwater fly fishing. There's nobody. Brian's career was 30 years as a fisheries biologist, and was responsible for managing over 800 lakes in BC. I mean, I've had the fortune of getting on the water with Brian, and it's exceptional. I mean, the guy is just so knowledgeable about fishing and about catching fish, and he still loves to do it. He still laughs like a kid when you get hooked up. And then we've got some young up-and-comers, folks like Brennan Lund, who sort of was just a fishing geek as a kid, it seems like, and just got totally immersed in the fly fishing world. He was on the junior Canadian fly fishing team for a while. Now he's studying fisheries at university, as well as a full-time guide in the summer, and even took a semester off to make sure he could guide for steelhead up in the Skeena. Guys that are really passionate about fishing. And on top of that, these guys are all great at creating content themselves. So they don't just fish really well. They don't just know fishing. They're great content creators, and they help us to tell the story of Islander. And that's part of it, right? It's about guys who know fishing, guys who, and girls for that matter, who are living this lifestyle and who can help represent the story of Islander and what we're really all about. You know, folks like Lael Johnson and Yost Gladstone as well, both own successful fly fishing businesses, guiding services. These guys really know the products, they really know the fishing, and they're great at creating content and telling the story of who Islander is. And what the point I'm making is that it's not just about owning an Islander. It's about really having a relationship again with us, being able to represent us really well. And that's why we keep it small. You know, we need to be able to know who these guys are. We need to know who these girls are who we're working with.
You talk about what your pros, like, I don't want to say pro staff. I want to say more like an ambassador or a partnership that you guys have with Brian and Brendan. You say they create content for you. And is some of that content social media aspect, or is it more blogs?
It's a little bit of both, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are great photographers and they create content that way. Some of it is blogs, and we encourage them to write blogs for us where they can share some of their experiences on the water, whether it's trip report or tips. Tom Johannesson, who's a frequent contributor to BC Outdoors and other magazines, writes great blogs for us that share some of his knowledge and insights about the fishing world. So content, it takes a lot of different forms. And again, it's about more than just building reels for us. It's about facilitating the whole experience in the outdoors.
Of course it is, yeah.
And content
Absolutely.
is a part of that in the world we live in. So showing people those, this conversation we're having right now, it's helping people to nurture their love for the outdoors. It's helping people to nurture their experiences in the outdoors. We can't all be out every weekend, but we can live vicariously through these guys who do that for a living. And so blogs, photos, videos, trip reports. In a couple of weeks, we're going to be doing a little field team trip out to one of our local rivers with a bunch of the guys, and we're going to hang out together, just get to know one another and really build that concept of it being a team and fishing together that way. So yeah, content means a lot of different things, but generally speaking, it's about sharing the experiences we all love and want to do through fishing. That's a part of the Islander brand. It's part of what we want to live for and do. I mean, we all love to fish. I was out this past weekend on that river and didn't have a particularly great day, but I did get a couple to the net, and that's all that matters. And you know what? Even if it didn't, I was out the weekend before and I got skunked, and I was on the one hand I was not happy about it, but on the other hand, I was back the next weekend because I just love being out there, and it's an exceptional time of year to be on the water. And no matter where you are in this country, as things green up, waters are warming, the sun's nice. It's just a phenomenal time to be outdoors.
I fully agree with that. You know what, Steve? I want to ask you. You mentioned earlier, and I'm going to circle back to it. You mentioned earlier in our conversation about some lodges down south. Can you tell me a bit about that? Some island lodges?
Through some contacts that we have, we've been able to build some relationships with Islander destinations. And these are places where you can go and have an experience with an Islander product. One of them is Estancia Laguna Verde. For those of you who don't know, that's on sort of the world famous Jurassic Lake, and it's a place that's known for its exceptionally large rainbow trout. Before there was no fishery there in that lake. There was no sport fish, but the lake is extremely prolific when it comes to insect growth. So they, I don't know how long ago, it was 100 years ago or so, they put in these rainbow trout, and they literally grow to Jurassic proportions in this fishery. And Estancia Laguna Verde is one of two lodges on that lake that offers access to this phenomenal fishery. And the owners also own the Golden Dorado River Cruiser, which is a pretty unique fishing experience. You basically board this floating lodge and you go upstream into the Parana River Basin. You look for Golden Dorado, and Golden Dorado are just an absolutely ferocious predator. One of our field team members, Jeff Fisher, was down fishing for them in Bolivia and said, Steve, man, the first one, I put a pair of pliers in that fish's mouth to try and take the hook out, and it clamped down. I couldn't get my pliers out. Its jaw was that strong, and every single tail of the fishes are chewed up because they're just absolute ferocious monsters and a ton of fun to catch. And so we're building a relationship with them. We sent a couple of our field team members down there to do a little fishing and experience those lodges, and we hope that's a relationship that will grow in the future. We also have just launched a new destination partnership with the West Coast Fishing Club, and as a matter of fact, literally 7 minutes ago, I sent out a newsletter or I had scheduled a newsletter going out to talk about an interview I had a chance to do with Les Stroud, the Survivor Man, and an upcoming trip that he's going to be doing to the West Coast Fishing Club, another place where you can go and experience some of the world's best salmon fishing. You're going to bump into our reels there. That's what they use exclusively at that particular lodge. So we're trying to build the relationships with not only just anglers, but lodges as well, who share our sort of vision for fishing, and again, we can all share and promote the experience that we love so much, and that's what the Destinations program is all about. We've got a couple others in the works as well.
So can I ask you, if I was a lodge owner, could I reach out to you guys, and if we worked well together, we fit the right criteria, I could be an Islanders Destination Lodge part?
Absolutely. Again, it's not something we just hand out to everybody. it's about building that relationship, right? It's in the same way that we are trying to build the relationship with respect to the field team, and we keep it small and we keep it exclusive. That's kind of what we're looking for with the lodge. So we don't necessarily just go with any guide service or whatever. It's really about those lodges who offer a unique experience, a premium experience, much like a user would expect with their fly reels.
You did mention a few things that were kind of caught my attention in the little there is that you have some new ideas or new partnerships forming. What else is new over that?
Well, I don't want to put all our cards on the table, but we spilled the beans last year on a new center pin that we're working on, and that is nearing completion. We keep getting questions on it, and that, guys, I promise it is in the works. It is coming.
Just to back up about the center pin. Sorry, this is the new center pin that you guys have been running the same center pin for what, like 30 years, right?
Not quite. We did start with the Pacific steel header, and now we've just got a regular steel header that we've been, I don't remember how long it's been launched,
exactly.
But we keep running it because it keeps selling and people love it. So, but it's a 4.5-inch design, and the new one will be a 5-inch model. There'll be a shift in look and feel, a little more modern compared to our typical classic looks. But yeah, we're excited about launching that new reel in the larger configuration to handle either bigger water, a little faster pickup for big fish. If they charge at you, you can bat that in.
And for us fly fishers?
So, I mean, it's no secret that seal drags are pretty important for a lot of people these days. As far as I'm concerned, they're not everything, because if a seal drag breaks on you, then your trip is sort of hooped. Whereas our current classic cork system does allow you to fix things up quite well, and nothing really can go wrong with that. So there are advantages, but seal drags are something that is important, but we want to get it right. And so nothing is imminent as far as a launch. We are testing and we're developing that. And we've also had a lot of requests, classic click pulse bait. At one point we did release one. We weren't quite happy with its performance. So we're considering a new design there. But again, nothing's on the immediate horizon. It's just something that we definitely have in the pipeline, but it's not immediately about to be released. So guys, don't overwhelm us with the when.
You know, my wheels are just turning, just picturing how beautiful that spay would look. And of course, you guys, you still offer the variety of colors. Yeah. Is that correct?
That's right. We have 5 standard colors. So we've actually swapped out slate for red color, which is pretty sharp as far as I'm concerned. So we've got red, gold, blue, black, and clear. Quite a variety of colors that you can work with, and those 5 standard colors are always available. So, and then once in a while we do drop in special colors, but that probably, I don't know if we're going to be doing a special color drop this year, but we'll see.
Just actually want to touch base about all the awards and the accolades you guys have won from the industry. Like, what's your most recent one?
Our most recent award was for the TR3. We released that. That's our newest reel. It's a seal drag trolling reel, so mooching style reel, but specifically designed for downriggers. And Fish Alaska awarded it an Editor's Choice Award in 2018, I think, 2017. I can't remember exactly, but we're pretty proud of that because Alaska is one of the premier salmon fishing destinations, and for it to be recognized by a magazine like that, whose readership is throughout the Pacific Northwest and is sort of considered a go-to source for saltwater fishing, it means a lot to us, and we're hopeful that some of the new reels that we launch will also get recognized.
You guys are involved with a few events that you mentioned earlier. Is there any other charities or events that you guys are involved in that we might not know about?
Well, obviously we continue to support the Pacific Salmon Foundation, and with some of the announcements that's been going on, there's no more important time to continue to support our fishery in southern BC, or in BC in general. And the Pacific Salmon Foundation do incredible work and advocacy, whether that's research, fundraising, rehabilitation grants. I mean, they really are an industry leader for fishing research. You know, a lot of fishing-based conservation groups could learn a lot from, reaching out to the Pacific Salmon Foundation to learn about the kind of work that they do. I mean, they just spearheaded an international research mission into the Pacific Ocean to try and understand the lives of the saltwater lives of Pacific salmon. And I believe there were scientists from 7 countries out there cruising around the Pacific Ocean for over 3 weeks, collecting data on open ocean lives of salmon. So that's pretty cool. But then we also support a number of other initiatives in more local waters, such as derbies that raise money for hatcheries, rehabilitation projects. One of the ones that comes to mind is the Fish for the Future event up in Tofino, but there are many others. And then it's not necessarily a charity, but we're pretty excited to be involved with the Great Ontario Salmon Derby in Lake Ontario. I can't speak enough about the incredible salmon fishery that takes place every summer on Lake Ontario. And that derby runs for 50 days long. I can't remember the numbers, but it's well into the six figures for total prize value. And this year, we've also decided to sponsor the Salmonorama Derby out of Wisconsin, on Lake Michigan. And that's another major salmon derby there. Huge dollars, huge opportunities on the line for prizes. And that runs in July for 9 days, I believe. So I'm hoping to get out there and be there for the weigh-in for that.
Yeah, definitely. I hope that materializes for you as well. It's so great to hear the passion in your voice when you talk about this. I want to ask you, where do you see the brand in 5 years from now?
It's a good question. I see us being definitely much more of a household name south of the border. We love the fishery in the States, and we've kind of been sleeping on it a little bit for the past couple of years. We want to be back in there, and in particular around the Great Lakes and Pacific Northwest, where guys are familiar and they're using all three lines of our products. We really love to see get to know the anglers there, get to know the businesses there, get to know the charters there, the shops, and start building those relationships, because ultimately, like I said, that's really what it is about our brand. You know, we like to know the people who are using our reels. We like them to know us. We like to receive phone calls to ask questions. We really want to build that connection and get to know the anglers. So yeah, that's sort of where we're looking, is that sort of region right now within the next 5 years, Pacific Northwest, Great Lakes, and getting to know the anglers around there. And with that said, feel free to reach out. I love chatting with you guys. I love when you send your photos in of fish, what's happening. I usually like to hear how the day went and things like that, because most of my days I spend sitting in the office thinking about fishing, and so I get to live vicariously through you.
What are some parting words that you might have for somebody?
You know what, guys? I think, Greg, it's really this fishing landscape has changed quite a lot with the advent of social media. In the past, we looked at fishing as much of an individual or family pursuit, and it most definitely still is. In my interview with Les Stroud there, that's one of the things we talked about, is how fishing really brings people together. But in the past, you had to really physically be with someone. And what's great about our fishery today is that we have the opportunity to build relationships with people all over the world now. And that comes in the form of connections on social media, talking to one another, building one another up, and really supporting our fishery and advocating for our fishery together. So I think that in the face of challenges, in good times and bad, I think we need to band together as fishermen across styles of fishing and support one another and get to know one another. And if you're going to a new place, reach out, find people on social media, reach out, build relationships with other anglers across the world. And that's really going to help our sport grow and thrive when people look at us and say, hey, it's not just about catching fish. It's about a community. It's about us working together. And that's something that we want to facilitate here at Islander is building that community, building that family, while also maintaining sort of that legacy notion of, we do this and pass it on between generations. And that's really what we're all about. And that's what we want to facilitate as a brand.
Usually I ask my guests if, what's one thing within the fishing industry or fly fishing industry they would change. And it sounds like you kind of summed it up there, but is there anything else you'd like to add to that question?
No, that's really it. I mean, I don't know if it's changed so much as continue to change. I think it is already happening. I just look at some of the messages that are out there, and even just yesterday, as a matter of fact, I don't know if anybody follows Marina Gibson. I just happened to notice on social media the other day that she said something along the lines of, her desire to see other fishermen reach out to her and to try and connect with them when she goes to different places. And that's pretty cool for someone who is a major influencer in the industry, Orvis ambassador, does a lot of fly fishing. As a matter of fact, I had a chance to use our mooching reels for sturgeon last year. But for her to reach out like that with thousands of followers and say, hey, you know what, message me. I'd love to get together with you in the water. That says something about the kind of community that we have in fishing, and that needs to continue. We need to support that and work together to see this fishery thrive.
Steve, before I let you go, do you have anything for our listeners today?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got promo code followers to get yourself 10% off from our website through 2019. It's just Fly Fishing Insider. You can use that at checkout and get 10% off. But also, like I said, if you have any questions for me, you can just reach out on social media.
Perfect. I'll make sure I put all that in the show notes. And Steve, I want to thank you for being our guest today on the show. All right. Great. Thank you. Thank you to the listeners as well, guys.
My pleasure.